Okay, great.
There we go. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is share a link with you where we've placed all of this information. No big surprise, we have way too much information to go over. So we're just going to put all of it available in PowerPoint, and it's right here. So first, I'm going to be talking a little bit about data security that's very specific to Ombuds offices and the Ombuds process. And then Colin will be talking a little bit more about just some more generic things that we need to be aware of with when we move data online. Okay, so that's the plan. You have access to both of them there. We're going to be covering a very truncated portion of these slides, but if you are a glutton for punishment and want to go really deep into all of the different links and privacy policies, we have them all available there in the slides. So let's present here. Okay. So first, if you want to reach us, claire@mediate.com or cruel@mediate.com. And I just want to give you a quick background. This is us as we have been designing an online dispute resolution system. This walks you through a little bit of what our thought process was. So some of the things that we initially tried and where we are now. So where we are now, obviously, is we've all had to move quite a bit online. We've had to move our intake, our scheduling, our calendaring, a lot of our actual meeting with visitors into an online format, our data protection, where we're storing our data, how we're creating documents, and how we are generating reports. Suddenly that's all online. It used to be that I could store everything in my own Excel version on my laptop and I could jot things down with Post-its. That's just not working anymore. It's not safe and it's not helpful for our visitors. So since we're all in this boat, let's learn a little bit from each other. And this is based off of the work that we've done at mediate.com with Caseload Manager, Colin's work with CREC, Modria, and then discussing some other systems, Legaler, Practice Panther, MadTrack Clio, and ICANN has just been amazing and very supportive. We've been working with them for 10 years now, almost 10 years working with their caseload management system. They were early adopters. Big surprise that ICANN wanted to work with the internet to manage their cases. And so we've done quite a bit of work with them, just thinking through what the intake process needs to look like and the meeting process. So I'm going to be sharing some of their tips here as well. Okay. First, again, we've at mediate.com, we started designing a caseload management system about 15 years ago at this point, went through a lot of different processes and learned a lot of things that just really did not work. The couple of things that we took away from this whole process was that all of our clients, whether they're Ombuds visitors, whether they're community mediation clients, that the things they keep coming back to were transparency and security, right? They want a process that they can understand and they want it to feel safe, which makes sense, right? If you're going into a room to discuss your deep, dark secrets, you want to know that it's a safe room, even if that's an online room. So again, we've got lots of things here. This is where I want to mainly spend my time. So the visitors essentially touch us at five different points through the process, right? They're going to be interacting with you as an Ombuds at 5 different points. And so I wanted to focus on these points and just think about how can we make this feel as safe and simple as possible? So first, the intake form. They have to reach out to you in some way. And the majority of Ombuds have said, you know, email is really not the right format for that. And oftentimes people can't call if they're sitting in an office full of a bunch of other people. They simply can't call you, which means that we need to find some kind of an intake form that is secure. One of the obstacles that we found for those forms is that they just feel overwhelming. It feels like an Ombuds office is initially asking for too much information. It's not the right time and place to ask, well, tell me why you were upset and why was the other person upset and what is your desired outcome. And because you haven't established a rapport yet and people don't know where this information is going. So right off the bat, what we found was develop some kind of an intake process and just ask a couple of simple questions, right? You just need some way to be able to get back to the client. And then second, let's make this as easy on yourself as possible, right? It doesn't just have to be simple for your visitors. It should be simple for you. So this intake form doesn't just need to go and die somewhere. It should do something. It should create a case on your system. It should generate a PDF that you can refer to. So as you're looking for different intake processes, we want something that's simple for the client, but also simple for you. Okay, next, scheduling. We don't want to spend a lot of time emailing back and forth with our clients, again, because that's often not a secure process. So instead, what we recommend, come up with some kind of a scheduling link, something like Calendly. They have made this so incredibly simple. We've also used Simply Book Me, and I have a lot of these included in later slides, but let me just throw them in the chat as well. Calendly, Simply Book Me, Cogsworth is another one that we've heard about. For me, that was a little bit too complicated. I liked Calendly a little bit better. And what we're looking for here, we want it simple and we want it secure. So something like Calendly, it's just a one single click that your visitors have to click on. But the key here is that information is not being stored on the university server. It is not being sent to you in an email in an unsecure format. All that information is being stored with Calendly and then being placed on your personal calendar. Okay, that's what we're looking for here, is that division where all of your visitor information stays on this side of the wall and all the university PeopleSoft employee information stays on this side of the wall, that there isn't a crossover. All right. So with scheduling, that's why we're looking at some kind of an external format so that your visitor information stays nice and safe on this side. Again, it's important to keep the information safe because it's our responsibility. But more than that, we are letting clients know, we're letting your visitors know right from the beginning, this is a safe place. I am not going to share your information with somebody that doesn't need to know about it. I want to have a private conversation with you. Okay. Second, meeting. Let's face it, we all know how to do online meetings at this point. Zoom, we've all become pretty comfortable with it, but there are simply some places that do not accept Zoom. So what are some of our other options here? I think it's fine to use something like Meeting Space, Blue Jeans, Google Meet, as long as we can ensure that we have that end-to-end encryption and that we've set up some kind of safeguards in the beginning. We have a bunch available online. I have some sample guidelines and confidentiality forms that simply state, hey, we need to make sure that nobody else is in the room. We need to make sure that this meeting isn't being recorded. We need to make sure that you're not taking screenshots. And it's just an understanding that we want to keep this meeting in a secure format. Okay, so even if we continue to meet online, there's some steps that we can make to ensure that it's still safe. All right. Next, I'm going to go through these kind of quickly, and then I'll pass this over to Colin. For our forms, again, we don't want a huge paper trail here. Remember, I want to keep that wall where I want to keep all of my visitor information on one side of the wall. So whenever I am sending them forms, I want those forms to originate not from the university server. I want it to come not from my email, but instead come directly from the platform itself, or come from an outside server or an outside platform, so that any kind of, if they have to sign a confidentiality form, if they have to agree to next steps, that this stays again in a completely secure off the grid place. Finally, reporting, because it's not just enough to get good data in, right? We also have to find some way to get that good data out. So when I'm looking at reporting platforms, I want to make sure that it's in a place that knows how to protect this data. Okay, especially in California, they have done some very advanced work about that. It's our responsibility as ombuds to look at where our data is going to go. The California Privacy Act, I talk about it in some later slides. Essentially, they have said that you are breaching your client's trust if you end up passing that data on to a platform that is not as responsible with that data as you are. Okay, so in other words, we need to take our client's data very seriously when we are passing it to a reporting platform. Let's think about, are they protecting the data? Am I able to delete the data? And do I know that it's being stored in some kind of an encrypted format? So let's look at that a little bit more seriously. First off, I mentioned that I was going to give you a couple of links. If you want to dive deeper into this, here's ICANN standards, iCoder standards, which Colin will refer to in a second. Some of the Privacy Shield standards. I'm mostly looking at the US right now, but I know that quite a few of you are working with international visitors and international sites. And then finally, at Caseload Manager, here are the standards that we have arrived at. And again, I want to share these with you because this is after 12 years of research. This is what we have found as the best standards for protecting our visitors' data. And this is what a lot of our clients have settled on. So I wanted to share this with you. Again, this is specifically in the US in university offices where this is a requirement, okay? So as soon as a US Ombuds office has finished working with the case, what they have requested, immediate deletion off of our server. Again, that's not the university server because we don't ever want the visitor's information to head over there. They're storing their information in a separate place. As soon as they're done working with that case, immediately delete that information and know that within 30 days, even the backups will be deleted. So any personal identifying information, which we have identified as name, email, phone number, and any notes specific to the person, that will be deleted. Anything demographic, obviously we want to save, right? Because that's how we are keeping track of our trends, keeping track of creating reports so that we can start to look at any potential conflicts coming down the road. So any demographic information, department, ethnicity, gender, student status, ethnicity, age, gender, all of that typical stuff. Okay, that we want to save. It's the rest of the identifying information that we want to delete. Any email that is coming to your visitors about a case, again, we want it to come from a separate server and make sure that no personal identifying information is being shared there. So what would usually be shared in that type of an email? Typically something like, hey, a message has been posted in your Caseload Manager, log in and look at it. Or please confirm that we are going to meet next Monday. Okay, so it's not anything about the case. You want to make sure that that stays in a secure server, like a forum or chat room that they have to log into. Again, intake, separate server, very limited questions. Same thing with documents, separate server. Make sure that this is archived in a password protected place. Okay, so that's for putting the data in. But let's not forget, that's only the first half of it. We also have to be aware of how we are getting the data out. So I'm trying to just give you a couple of takeaways here that you want to think about. Because again, it's not just enough to put good data in. We want to do something with it, right? We want to understand, what does this data mean? What can we forecast? So first, we want to connect with some kind of a reliable data analysis tool. Some of the ones that we recommend: Amazon, Power BI, Tableau. Any others that you want to jump in and add to that, Colin? I think those are the three big ones we've been talking about. Yeah.
Yep, those are the big ones.
Okay. Make sure that you have an encrypted handshake, right? So it shouldn't just be that, oh, I'm sitting in an airport using random airport Wi-Fi and I'm uploading all of this deeply sensitive information. No, you want to make sure that you're on a private network, that you have an encrypted handshake. And that's typically something that your programmers or developers can arrange. So you have your data set somewhere You have a data analysis tool. Let somebody else form that handshake for you so that you know it's going through a good solid pipe instead of you just throwing the information to the wind. And then my favorite is just, does it feel safe? Does it feel like this is secure? Does it feel like anything is identifiable? So if you've created a report and it says, oh, we had a female age 30 to 34, Asian American descent in the arts department who submitted 3 complaints about this. Well, that person is pretty dang identifiable, right? So I think it's—
Well, that's why you didn't do that.
Right. So I think we need to discuss first getting a safe place to put the data in, a safe place to put the data out, but then also realize that you are in this job because you know people and because you have a good emotional insight, a good EQ. So it's the technology, but I think it's also combining your gut instinct with the technology and just giving it an overall view of, does this feel like safe technology? Does this feel like a safe process for my visitors? Okay. So final takeaways here. Your visitors, what they really need is transparency, right? They need to know, where is my data being stored? What does this process look like? And I recommend having lots of stuff on your website where they can browse through and understand how secure is this site? What is the process going to look like? Do I know that it's encrypted? Is anything going to be recorded? Where is it stored? Let them know that you've thought about all of those pieces and jot it down on your website so they can look at it. What the visitor really wants is simplicity, right? They want an easy intake form. They want an easy way to join the meeting, an easy way to wrap everything up at the end. Just give them a couple of quick links. And then our final takeaway here, I think it is our responsibility as the person in charge of this process to make sure that the process is safe. So walk through it from A to Z as a visitor and just think about, is there any point here where there's a potential leak in the pipe? Okay. Is there a point where they're relying on me to email them something, or they are relying on me to submit data through a process that isn't encrypted? So I think it really has become our duty to walk through that entire process and just look through it all and say, is there any way that I can strengthen the security here? If you feel like there's a part that is not safe or encrypted, I'd recommend reaching out to us. I gave you Colin's email. Let's all just reach out to Colin and say, what do we think about this? Is there another option? Is there a better option for a more secure platform or a way that I can strengthen up my intake forms? Again, we're all going through this process together. So let's take the time to learn from each other. Okay, that's what I wanted to share, only about 5-10 minutes longer than I thought I would be. All right, handing it back to you, Colin.
Okay, and I'm going to go quick here because I definitely want to engage in the conversation with everyone. Digital security, the challenge of this for Ombuds is it's a bit of a moving target. There's so many different risks around the use of technology in terms of security. So if you think about internet security, which is risk of connection to the internet, the wider internet, but system security, maybe your local systems aren't being run in a secure way, algorithmic security, operator security, and trust security. So I don't want to, again, overwhelm you with all of these things, but it's also a bit of a moving target. And we have a chief information security officer within our ODR.com team that is looking at all this stuff in real time, because what happens is, even if you make a system totally secure today, there could be a vulnerability discovered tomorrow in one of these areas. So it's a little bit of an arms race against the threats that are out there. And when you look at the tools that Ombuds are using across the internet, a lot of these tools we use because they're so convenient. People understand how to use it. And I think Claire made this point about email and calendar invitations and Google Docs and text messages. But the challenge is all of these tools have different security concerns. And there's a lot of people in the security space that are saying, boy, we need to really move off some of these tools. One example, of course, is email. And, I'm not going to get into all of this, but you can imagine if someone sends you sensitive information over email, or not just you, sends it to you send sensitive information over email to someone else, that could be forwarded to 100 other people and you'll never know. And it's stored on all those computers and you don't have the ability to delete it or pull it back. So that's one of the reasons why we're doing a lot of thinking about, okay, what's next? How can we communicate with our customers, our parties, our users in ways that we know are secure and live up to our ethical obligations as ombuds? So another example is video. And this is something that Clara talked about as well. We're using video very extensively now in our practices. And the good news is there are ways to make video secure. But these are all really good questions. You know, if you're using a platform that you don't know, do you know that it's not being recorded? Can somebody intercept the feed if it's not encrypted en route? And, you know, is location being tracked? That can be a big issue as well. So there are things that we can do. Essentially deploying these tools in such a way that they abide by our agreed upon best practices and ethical standards in the field. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important that we build our own technology and not just use technology that's available off the shelf. Because a lot of the things that come for free on your laptop and your phone, they're made for convenience. They're not made for security. So I don't want to go too deep into this. You know, ICODR, which is the International Council for Online Dispute Resolution, we're coming up with best practices and security guidelines for mediation, arbitration, and ombuds. And we're doing a lot of consultation with other organizations around what these security guidelines should look like. You know, and Mediate is working on this, IMI is working on this, IOA is working on this, I know. So I think there's a lot that's going to be coming out over the next few years because so much of the work that we do has moved online. But I do think that it is important that we be aware of these things. I think there are some things that we need to deal with on the back end in terms of building the software and structuring these systems to make sure that they're secure. But then also, as Claire mentioned, this has a lot to do with the front end experience of clients. Do they feel that it's safe? Do they feel that it's transparent? Because if they don't feel that security, they're going to be reluctant to utilize these tools. So, you know, I think it is helpful to have training, even if it's just foundational training in data security. Not everybody has to code Java. That's okay. You can leave it to the nerds to do that. But I think it's also appropriate for us to do routine security audits and tests on all the platforms to make sure that the tools that we're using are secure. So I think I may leave it there. There's a lot of other questions that we can get into, but why don't I open it up? I'll stop my share and let's use our last 5 minutes to just discuss more broadly about this. Any other points, Claire, that you think we should make or questions to pose to the group?
No, thank you. That was great. That was great.
So does anybody, yeah, please.
Kimberly.
I was noticing on the last slide, security certification, ISO 270. Where would we look for that in material, or would we just ask the provider?
I think that's the kind of thing you would ask a provider about. You know, we are going to have ISO 27001 and 27002 certification by the end of the year. That's usually getting an outside security consultant to come in and test your systems, and then you have to have a bunch of policies in place. So, you know, it's a long certification effort, and that's not, the ISO didn't create that specifically for ombuds or dispute resolution. Mm-hmm. It's a broader security standard, but there's other ones like SOC 2 compliance, you know, they're kind of international standards around security. And I just think it's important that we deploy those. You know, I think the strategy we're taking at Mediate.com and ODR.com is let's find this most stringent requirement and let's abide by that. And then we'll be compliant with everything else. So that, I think that's, did you have a follow-on?
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to know if providers would know how to engage somebody to do that for them, or
yeah. I would say if you are building a platform or you're utilizing a platform, either ask the people building the platform if they've done this work, or find an outside security consultant that can go through that audit for you. A penetration test is where they have like a program that comes in and hits your website from every direction and looks for open windows and open doors. And it's just good to have an outside organization do that once in a while, just to make sure you don't have, you haven't left something open that a bad guy could exploit. And as I said, those things change all the time. So it's important to do it periodically.
And it also, it takes a lot of time. Like, I think when we first began working with International Monetary Fund, it was about 6 months of pretty intense smoke testing, penetration testing. Essentially, they were doing everything they could to try to hack in and break the system. Yeah. So it wasn't just let me run an overnight test. It definitely, it took a little bit of thought to make sure that everything was secure. I think Howard was next, and then Chuck Duran.
Yes, if I could. Compliments to both of you. You have really kind of upped the awareness of Ombuds with your product and with your talking. Thank you for hosting this program. And as I'm learning more about all of this, one of the things that I've tried to do for IOA, the International Ombuds Association, is put together a group, task force that's dealing with these kinds of data security, confidentiality issues. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about that you haven't addressed, many things that we hopefully will be addressing, you have addressed, is the digital footprint that is almost inescapable of Ombuds, even if you do all the stuff that you're saying. So, for example, in the world that I used to live in, dealing with clients on litigation holds and electronic searches, you know, it's the keyword search that finds emails, even if you think you've got some emails on your server, there probably are still emails on somebody else's, on the institution service.
That's right.
Somebody else has said. And one of the things that came as a surprise to me, but not really, is the proximity location devices. You know, how many ombuds are telling people to turn off their cell phones before they actually meet in person? There's a whole range of things, all of which really illustrates to me that the obligation to protect data security is not just with ombuds anymore.
Right.
The concept that ombuds can protect their own secure information, I think is limited as paper documents. What we really need now is protocols and agreements with institutions in Ombuds office that talk about how they proceed with data searches for electronic information and what the disclosure protocols are, reasonable access use protocols. Have you done any work in that space? I mean, that's where I see you've taken care of a big piece of it, but there's still a piece that I think Ombuds should be aware of. And I'm just asking.
Yeah, I mean, to respond to that, Chuck, I don't think we've done enough of that work. I mean, your knowledge about it actually is helpful. I want to engage in this dialogue further to think about the full parameters of the work that needs to be done.
A chance to do that, because I'm really trying to do this on behalf of IOA and all of its members so that we can, because I think there's a huge education role and you're a part of it here.
Sure.
People to think about the new world that they operate in, because virtually nothing that they do doesn't leave digital footprints and fingerprints.
Right.
It's true. It's
and
true.
you really can't control it.
And you know, one of the things that we talked about a lot at eBay was, because I was in trust and safety, we owned all the security stuff at eBay. One of the things we said, we can build a 100% secure platform. It's just we can't allow anybody into it. You know, users are what make it insecure. And the thing is, even if we build a completely bulletproof platform with two-factor authentication and biometrics and everything's encrypted, somebody can still take out their phone, take a photo of the screen, you know, or they can hit record on their phone and then play it through their speakers. And even though we've done everything we possibly can to lock it down, there's still a way that the information can be compromised. So I think that it's not just about us building a fortress with really high walls and broken glass on the top of it. It's also, we have to communicate with our partners and stakeholders and hosts and the organizations we work in so that they understand that this information is sensitive too, and they have obligations around protecting it as well. So I think you're absolutely right, Chuck. We need to talk about that.
It's the next stage, I think.
Yeah. And Chuck, just to echo what you've said, I love that you've already thought about putting together some kind of a committee to discuss this. And I know that I'm speaking for mediate.com here, but I know that we would love to be a part of that, be helpful however we can. And my one encouragement is that it's not just developing a set of protocols, but it's developing an ongoing discussion, because as Colin mentioned, things are changing so quickly. And so I hope that it could be a beginning set of protocols that then perhaps is updated annually.
I will be in touch.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you. Chuck Duran.
Great. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Colin, for this. I just have a two-part question. One, does Caseload Manager take steps to delete those identifying fields, such as like first name, last name, email, ombuds notes at some point? And a second question is, I'm curious if there are any ombuds, and actually Chuck Howard, I have an email drafted to you on this subject. I'm still going to send it, but the question is, has anybody in their charters asked their clients to commit to working on protecting the ombuds should they be subpoenaed? Like, for example, would they actually commit in advance to making sure that they would work with the ombuds to shield them from having to testify?
I'm not aware of that kind of a provision. Do send me the email. And there's somebody else who's put in the chat a question very similar to that. And you can reach out to me and we can talk about that. What we have done, both for my clients and for IOA members more broadly, is talk about the understanding of the terms and conditions under which the Ombuds service is provided. And I think that that should be part of everyone's charter, where you say it's based on these principles. No one's required to use it, but if you do, you will be understood to have agreed to abide by the principles. That way you have it all without keeping track of signatures and records. You know, once you start getting people to sign things, then you're a record keeper for the institution, or at least for your office, and that causes problems. And ultimately, you can't really enforce that against them. What you can do is take this type of a provision and use it as an understanding that gives you the ability to go in without asserting a privilege to claim that a court should not force you to testify about those confidential communications. And that's been my approach. And Sharon, I hope that answers your question, but if you have other questions, just send me an email. But this is very helpful. This is exactly the kind of consciousness raising that I think ombuds need.
Yeah. If I could address the first part of your question, Chuck, just really quickly. You know, this is a big focus for us. We built the caseload manager platform from scratch. We know every line of code in it, and we're very committed to the ombud space. I think a lot of people are using tools that were not necessarily built for ombuds, and they didn't necessarily build the platforms. And I know, having built past platforms, it's very easy to rely on third-party services just to speed up your platform that actually mean that you can't actually you don't know where all the data is going. It may go into one server here and one server there. So we've coded it in such a way, as Claire mentions in her comment, which is actually absolutely right. Everything's configurable on our platform in terms of what's saved. And, you know, sometimes we work with public entities and they have record retention laws that require everything to be held onto for 10 years and made publicly available. That's the opposite in many respects to the way ombuds offices work, where they say, look, as soon as a case is closed, we want to make sure everything is deleted so there's no record of it on any server. So that is built into our platform to work that way. But I think, as Claire said, we want to work closely with IOA to make sure that the software abides by the ethical obligations that the field has set for themselves. So it's configurable, but it has all of that functionality, I think.
I'm just going to respond to Lori's question really quickly, and then I'll hand it over to you, Jim. So yes, our platform was built on the IOA categories, all of the complaint categories, visitor specification, that was all worked into it. So thank you, IOA, for developing all those categories for us so that we didn't have to think about all of them and we could just copy and paste the work that you had done. But again, everything is configurable based off of your specific office needs as well. So you can add in whatever additional demographic categories you need to. Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
And Claire, in terms of deleting personal identifying information, I think in the Ombuds model, isn't there literally a button that you just push to do that?
Right.
So that's really, it's really handy. And then again, the backups, of course, are also important, that over time it gets deleted there. I just, the two Chucks and myself were actually a little bit on the same wavelength, which I think is the importance of an organizational policy for responding to subpoenas. And I think even a broader organizational policy about privacy of information, and even specifically relative to ombuds programs and often mediation programs as well. And even the practical issues of, if a subpoena is received or if there is a request for data, exactly how is that responded to, including literally a response letter, that all of this can be anticipated and should and prepared for. And then I think when you add that to the user interface, where they see all the technical stuff about how you're trying to do the right thing, but then it's backed up by organizational policy that will resist subpoenas, that will do its absolute best to ensure privacy. I think this could only be good for business, if you will. So that's it from me.
Yeah. One additional takeaway is whatever program you're considering, make sure it has some kind of a free trial long enough so that your IT department has a chance to look at it. We have a minimum 1 month free trial with Caseload Manager so that the IT department can get in there and do everything they can to make sure it's secure enough to meet the university policies. And it should be the same with if you're using a different intake platform or scheduling, calendaring, whatever kind of platform you're using. Don't just assume that it meets your IT standards or your university standards policies. I think it is our responsibility nowadays to go in and protect our clients' information. And that means trying to beat it up a little bit, trying to test it, trying to break it as much as you can to know that it's safe before you trust your client's information in there. Yeah. That was mainly what I wanted to go over. So any additional questions from all of you before we wrap up? So I guess what I would like to sign off with is I do think that this is a really important conversation. And for a lot of ombuds, it's a fairly new conversation, right? A lot of mediation offices have been looking at this for the last 5 or 10 years. Most university ombuds offices haven't, simply because university ombuds have done such an incredible job at protecting their visitors' information. That has always been first and foremost. But now with everything moving online, suddenly we're pushed into a space that a lot of ombuds haven't needed to explore before. So I think this really is a time where we need to be intentional about saying things like, is there any point where it's acceptable to use email? Or is 30-day deletion of information off of a backup, is that acceptable? Because this is new ground for a lot of us where we are setting the standards. So I hope that this is an ongoing conversation where we can look at all of those different places where we're interacting with visitors and say, all right, are we doing a good job here? Are we protecting the information as much as possible? So personally, we are all hoping that this can be an ongoing conversation, and maybe once every few months, we just check in, look at some new issues and think about, are we doing the best that we can in this space? So, all right, so that's my sign off. Hoping to check in with all of you again soon. Thank you all for attending, and these were very valuable questions. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Keep up the good work. Stay well.
Thank you. Yes, thanks for the
Talk to
work
you
that you're
soon.
doing. Let us know if you have any questions. Again, our emails are right there.
Thanks.